Hey there, Jennifer. Welcome to today's broadcast. Hello, Emmanuel Rodriguez. Hello, Scope. My name is Dr. Joe McCullough, and the topic for today is brain facts that every speaker should know to help make sure that your message gets remembered. Let me turn a quick hello before we start talking specifically about the brain. Hey there, my name is Joe McCullough. I am a best-selling author, speaker, and I'm the physics program chair at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California. And for the last 10 years, I have been obsessed with the brain, how people learn, and how I can use that as a teacher to teach more effectively. What I'm doing right now is going to be scoping specifically about what are some facts that we know about the brain that you can use as a speaker to make sure your message gets remembered. Because as a speaker, it's great to motivate people and have them feel awesome at the end of a training, but our goal is to make sure that the information gets stored and remembered. We want to make sure it's stored in our long-term memory. So this week, the topic is going to be brain facts that speakers should know in order to make sure their message gets remembered. My name is Joe, and my goal is to scope every single day. It's not actually my goal. I've committed to scoping every single day for an entire year, sharing daily doses of inspiration, education, and motivation. And this week's all about education. What do we know about the brain? Let me show you a couple slides to start off with. The very first thing we're going to learn today is the fact that our brains store visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information in different parts of the brain. What this means as a speaker is that if we want our message to be remembered, we need to make sure we use different teaching modalities. I give you some brain. Oh, yes, you will. Okay, So I'm going to try this out. We will see how this works. So what we have is, we have three main modalities for learning. We've got visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Visual is all the information we receive through our eyes. Auditory is the information we receive through our ears. And kinesthetic is our kinesthetic information, our bodily information, what we do with our bodies. When we learn something, when we take in new information, that visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information first gets sent to a part of the brain called the thalamus. And the thalamus is like a relay station. And what it does is it actually takes that information, breaks it apart, and sends it to different parts of the brain. So visual information is sent to a part of the brain called the visual cortex, and that's located at the back of your brain. If you were to take your right hand and place it on the back of your brain, that is where your visual cortex is. Auditory information is sent to a part of the brain called the auditory cortex. You have one on each side right above your ear. And then kinesthetic information, all the information we receive through our body, sense of touch, is sent to the part of our brain called the somatosensory cortex. Let me turn. Okay. Now, whenever I present this to teachers, I always like to have hand motions because it adds a kinesthetic component. So we have three main ways of taking in information for learning. Now, we don't usually include the sense of touch and taste because they're not usually associated with learning. Those three main modalities are visual, everything that we see, auditory, everything we hear, and kinesthetic, what we do with our body or sense of touch. Again, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. If you were taking a training from me, I'd have you stand up and we would do a little dance. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Now, all the visual information we receive gets sent to the back of our brains called the visual cortex. That's where visual information is processed. And here's an interesting fact. Over 50% of our brain's resources are spent processing, analyzing, and storing visual data. Science is delicious if taste was used. Hey there, Casey, good to see you. I lost my train of thought. So what does this mean? As a speaker, it means that the more visual elements you can add to your presentation, the more memorable it's going to be. That's because our visual cortex processes our visual data, and like I said, more than half of our brain's resources are spent processing, analyzing, and storing visual data. All of the auditory information, everything that we get through our ears, gets sent to the part of the brain called the auditory cortex. So if you put your hands right above your ears, this is about where your auditory cortex is. This is the part of the brain that's allowing you to hear this scope right now. And then all of the kinesthetic information, our sense of touch, what we're doing with our bodies, gets sent to a part of the brain called the somatosensory cortex. And if you were to take your hand and go from ear to ear, that's where kinesthetic memories are stored. So as a speaker, if you want to make sure your message gets remembered, you need to use different modalities when you're presenting information. You never want to present it just one way. One of the worst things you can do, hi from Barcelona, hello. One of the worst things you can do is just get up there and talk for 90 minutes, 2 hours, something like that, without adding a kinesthetic component, getting the people moving, without adding some kind of visual component. So as a speaker, always be thinking about incorporating visual teaching modalities, auditory teaching modalities, and kinesthetic teaching modalities. Here's a few hints, and I'm going to be going through this in a lot more detail later on this year. Really today is just a few quick hits about VAK, and then we'll go through some more comments later this week. Yay! So in terms of visual, really think about using powerful images in your presentations. Use lots and lots of color. If you're writing stuff on a flip chart, never use one color. I recommend using at least 3. I wouldn't use more than 5. Powerful images have a way of really grabbing the attention. In terms of auditory, I love music. You've probably have been to trainings where music is a big component. Music has a way of just reaching people's souls, getting them moving, energizing. You can use music as a very powerful way of changing people's state. If you want to make them upbeat and happy, you put on some upbeat music. If you want to mellow it out, you put on some more mellow music. And then kinesthetic, have people moving. We'll talk about this more later, but people can only pay attention for about 10 minutes before their attention starts to fade. What you need to be doing is getting people moving, making sure that they're active. During my fun shops, it's what I like to call a workshop, fun shop. I'm constantly getting people standing up, reviewing the material, giving somebody a high five, a knuckle bump, an exploding knuckle bump, an elbow bump, getting them physically active. So today, the very first thing we talked about, first brain fact that you need to know as a presenter to make sure your information gets remembered is we have 3 main learning modalities for taking in and processing and learning information. Those are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And the key brain fact here is visual information is stored in a different part of the brain than auditory information, which is stored in a different part of the brain than kinesthetic information. Science is fun, especially when you're the teacher. Yeah. So, as a presenter, think about always using different teaching modalities that incorporate visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information. And the reason this is going to help your students remember the information is because if you only use one teaching modality, let's say you only present the information auditorily, that means it's only going to be stored in your auditory cortex, so when they go to try and remember it, it's only stored in one place of the brain. But instead, let's say not only do you use auditory, but you throw in some powerful images with visuals, you also use some kinesthetic components, then what's going to happen is the visual information is going to be stored in your visual cortex, the auditory information in your auditory cortex, and the kinesthetic information in your somatosensory cortex. As a physics teacher, every single lesson I'm thinking about, okay, what is the visual component? What is the auditory component? What is the kinesthetic component? Frankly speaking, the funny hand gestures just seem distracting. That may seem that at first. However, I guarantee you that the more you start to use them, what happens is they start to get linked. So I have presented this information so many times to teachers, I can't even say visual, auditory, and kinesthetic without this desire to actually move my hands. And if you can tie key content to not just some kind of phrase, but also a hand motion, it's going to be that much more memorable. that's kind of it for today. For the next few days, I'm going to be presenting a couple different brain facts that are going to help make sure your students, people attending your fun shops, your workshops, your trainings, remember the information. What a cutie. Why, thank you, Disney nerd. Before we leave today, what questions can I answer about this first brain fact? Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic information are stored in different parts of the brain. So if you want your information to be memorable, it's important to use different teaching modalities. And in a later scope, I'll go through specifically what are some good visual modalities to use, what are some good auditory, and what are some good kinesthetic. So my name is Joe McCullough. I'm a speaker, best-selling author, and physics program chair at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz. And every single day for the next year, I'm going to be doing daily scopes designed to educate, entertain, and inspire. This week, it's all about brain facts that every speaker should know to make sure their information is remembered. Before I sign off, what questions can I answer? How cool I'm. Okay, if you want to learn more, please swipe to the right on an iPhone, swipe straight up on an Android, and follow me or share this with people that you think might be interested. And I do post all of these replays on YouTube. So you could search for me at Joe McCullough, McCullough. That's it for today. One more quick pause. What questions can I answer? If there's none, then I will see you tomorrow. Questions, going once, going twice. Okay, my name is Joe. I will see you tomorrow for another important brain fact that you need to know as a speaker to make sure your information gets remembered. Until then, I will see you tomorrow.